Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 8 true disturbing stories about small towns in the Appalachian wilderness. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, share this with your friends, and let me know where you're watching from. Thanks. Now let's get into it. Creek. You've probably never heard of it unless you're from the area, and even then, good luck finding it on a map. It was a place buried so deep in the Appalachian foothills that GPS just stops working halfway there. People there still give directions using old barns or someone's cousin's trailer, and instead of saying something's 3 miles away, they'll say, about 10 minutes past the gas station if you don't hit the possum crossing. Bramble Creek's not the kind of place where things happen, and when they do, folks keep their mouths shut. Not out of fear, well, not always, but because it's just how it's always been. You learn early on not to ask too many questions, especially about certain families or certain parts of the woods. 3 months ago, maybe a little more, my cousin Jake showed up out of nowhere. I was half asleep on the couch, watching reruns with a beer in hand, when I heard a knock. Not a casual knock either. Sharp, fast, like someone was panicking. I opened the door, and there he was. He looked like he'd run through hell. Shirt soaked through with sweat, jeans torn up and muddy, no shoes. His feet were cut up, dirt packed into every crease. He was breathing like he'd sprinted the last few miles, and his eyes were jumping all over the place. Couldn't focus, like he was trying to look everywhere at once. First thing he said was, "Don't let it in. If it whispers, don't let it know your name." Didn't even say hi. I honestly thought he was high. Jake had a history. Worked oil lines out in Tennessee and Kentucky. Those gigs took him way out into the woods, middle of nowhere places with no reception and more meth than mailboxes. He'd messed around with some stuff back then, painkillers mostly, but he was always functional. The last thing he'd sent me before that night was a picture, just one, no message. It showed this busted up shack out in the woods, barely holding itself together. The trees around it looked wrong, twisted, leaning away and kind of crooked. He'd written, "Ever seen trees bleed?" as the caption. I figured it was a joke or one of those weird, creepy aesthetic posts people send late at night when they're bored or stoned. I didn't even reply, but when I saw him standing there that night, barefoot and shaking, I knew something was off. He wouldn't come inside right away, kept looking behind him like something might follow. I finally got him to step in, offered him water, tried to ask what happened, but he was in his own world. I asked if he wanted to crash on the couch. He didn't answer, just sort of collapsed onto it without a word. I left a blanket for him and went to bed. Next morning, around 6, I got up to make coffee, and the door was wide open, just swinging. Jake's blanket was folded neatly on the couch. His boots were still by the mat. No note, no text, just gone. I called the sheriff, told him everything. He shrugged and said Jake probably had a panic attack and wandered off to sleep it off. Said he'd be back in a day or two. I tried to push it, told him this wasn't like Jake, but you could already see it in his face. He wasn't going to do a damn thing unless a body turned up. So I went looking myself. I pulled up the photo Jake had sent, zoomed in on the background, the slope of the land, the trees, spent hours comparing it to topographical maps and trail guides. Finally figured it had to be somewhere near Cinder Run, an old logging road that hadn't seen a maintenance crew since shoulder pads were in style. I borrowed my dad's old rifle, packed a flashlight, water, and some snacks, and drove out that afternoon. Cinder Run looked like any other overgrown trail at first, but as soon as I stepped out of the truck, I realized how quiet it was. No birds, no bugs, no rustling leaves, just the sound of my own boots crunching gravel. It was wrong, but I kept going. Eventually, the trail got too narrow to drive. I parked and walked. About 2 miles in, the underbrush got nasty. Thorns on everything, vines that snagged your clothes and wouldn't let go. I had to cut my way through part of it. Then I saw it, the shack. I stepped onto the porch. The boards groaned under my weight. I reached for the door. It wasn't locked. Inside was empty. No furniture, no dust, just bare dirt floor and a section in the back where the boards looked newer. I pulled them up. Underneath was a cellar door, half covered in dead leaves. Looked old, like it hadn't been opened in years. Then I heard it, breathing. Wet, slow, and steady. Coming from below, I froze. Told myself Jake was down there, maybe injured, maybe hiding, maybe worse. I gripped the handle and pulled. The wood cracked, split down the middle. There weren't any stairs, just a tunnel, spiraling down, hand dug, roots sticking out everywhere. The walls looked clawed like something had scraped its way in or out. I slid in, used my arms and legs to brace myself. The deeper I went, the colder it got. I turned on my flashlight. The tunnel opened into a chamber. Small, circular, the size of a bedroom. And the walls, God, the walls were bones, not scattered, arranged, carefully. Skulls, ribs, femurs, all stacked with precision, pointing inward toward a pit. And something was crouched there. It was rocking. At first I thought it was human, starving maybe, sick. But its limbs were too long. Its back arched the wrong way. The skin was glossy, stretched tight like plastic wrap over raw meat. No ears, no nose, just these huge black eyes that glinted like wet stones in the light. It didn't move until I whispered, "Jake?" It turned, and in its arms it held a boot. Brown leather, worn, Jake's. Then its mouth opened. No sound came out at first. Then, whispers. Dozens of them, hundreds, all at once, overlapping, backwards, like static mixed with breathing. My head buzzed, my chest locked up. I dropped the flashlight. I don't remember climbing out, just clawing at dirt, roots ripping at my arms, knees slamming into stone. I broke the surface like a diver gasping for air. I ran, didn't look back, just tore through the woods until I stumbled out onto a gravel pull-off where two hunters were sipping coffee from a thermos. I must have looked insane, bleeding, covered in dirt, ranting. One of them said, "Cinder, run. Nobody goes up there. Not since the bone preacher started whispering." I begged them to help me find it again. We went back the next morning. It was gone. The shack, the clearing, even the trail. It was just forest. Normal, boring forest. We retraced every step. Nothing. Only thing I found was my flashlight, cracked in half, right where the trail used to be. Sheriff said I imagined it, that it was stress, trauma, too much time alone, but he didn't explain the drag marks in the dirt or the sap still leaking from the trees. He didn't mention how the birds stopped singing when we stepped into that part of the woods. 2 weeks later, I packed up and moved. Now I live 2 counties over. Quiet place. Normal. Except sometimes, right around 12:17 a.m., I get texts from Jake's number. Just blank messages. No words, always at the same time. I opened one once. My phone froze. It was a photo, blurry. Looked like trees, but they were split open, and something long and slick was crawling out. I don't open it anymore. I was 31 when I inherited a house in a place called Kessler's Hollow. Never heard of it. No one I knew had either. It's somewhere in the Appalachian foothills, but not the part you drive through on the way to somewhere better. This was a deep, twisted backcountry. The kind of place where GPS throws up its hands and says, "You're on your own." Then I get this call from some lawyer. Flat voice, no warmth. Said I was the only listed heir and Hank left me everything. The house, an old truck, and whatever cash he had tucked away in there. No debt, no taxes due, just mine now. And I wasn't exactly in a position to argue. I'd just been laid off from a wirehouse gig. My landlord was circling like a vulture. My car needed repairs that cost more than the thing was worth. So yeah, when someone offers you a whole property, you don't ask too many questions. You pack a duffel, sell what you can't carry, and hit the road. The bus got me to a town called Jeswick, which was barely a town. From there, I hitchhiked with a guy in a feed truck who chewed sunflower seeds the entire ride and said maybe 3 words. The last 10 miles were uphill on gravel roads that hadn't seen maintenance since the 80s. No road signs, no landmarks, just trees pressing in on either side until I wasn't sure I was still on the right plan. Inside, the smell hit me first. Dust, stale leather, and something else underneath, sharp and bitter, like someone had boiled dried herbs too long. Everything was coated in a fine film, and most of the furniture was wrapped in those stiff, crinkly plastic covers, the kind your grandma uses to protect a couch no one sits on. The wallpaper was peeling in curls, and some parts of the floor gave a little when I walked. There was no power, no water either, but the kitchen cabinets were fully stocked. Canned goods, some decades past expiration, and rows of glass jars sealed tight. Each one had a label written in shaky block letters, stuff like bitterskin, hair root, and for the dogmen. I stared at that one for a while, half laughing, half wondering if I'd walked into some Appalachian version of a fairy tale. I spent the first 2 days cleaning, airing out what I could, and figuring out how not to freeze at night. There was an old wood stove, thankfully, and a woodshed out back with just enough dry timber to get by. I made one trip into town to buy bottled water, a battery-powered lantern, and some real food. People stared at me, but not the curious kind of stare. More like they were waiting to see if I'd start bleeding from the eyes. The only person I saw near the property was a woman walking along the ridge, maybe 200 yards off. She had a shotgun slung over one shoulder and didn't even glance in my direction, just walked by like she had somewhere more dangerous to be. On the third night, around 3 in the morning, I heard the porch creak. I'd been dead asleep and woke up not sure why. Then it came again, that groaning wood sound, not wind, not raccoons. This was slow, paced, and heavy. Footsteps. I sat up, still in that half-dream state, thinking maybe it was a bear. Then I heard something drag. A metal scrape, long and lazy, like a chain or maybe a pipe. I grabbed the flashlight and crouched near the window, staying low. The steps stopped. I waited a full minute before I peeked out. Nothing, just empty boards, swaying in the dark. In the morning, the porch swing was flipped. Both chains had been unscrewed from the beam above and placed neatly on the ground beside it. Like someone didn't just wreck it, they disassembled it. That's when I started locking every door and wedging a chair under the bedroom knob. The next night, same time, 3:12 a.m., I woke to knocking, 5 taps, solid and spaced. Then silence. Then again, this time from a different wall. I lay in bed, gripping the crowbar I'd started sleeping with, counting the knocks. 6 different spots, each one deliberate. No rhythm, no panic, just a slow knocking tour around the house. When it stopped, I didn't move, just stared at the ceiling until dawn. Outside, no marks, no footprints. But the swing had moved again. This time, it was 20 feet into the yard, upside down. That day I went back into town. I needed answers. The only place open before noon was a diner run by a woman named Ruth. Big glasses, tired eyes. I told her my name, said I'd inherited Hank's place. She froze mid-pour and stared like I'd told her I eat kittens. "You fixin' to live there?" she asked. "Not sure," I said, "just trying to figure things out." She topped off my coffee and walked away without another word. Later, I asked a kid working the gas station what he knew. He didn't say much, just looked at the ground and muttered, "People don't talk about that house. Things knock back." That night, I didn't bother pretending to sleep, just lay there, crowbar across my chest, staring at the ceiling. Around 2:50, I started hearing sounds, not outside, downstairs, a low thud, then dragging, like someone moving furniture in slow motion. I crept to the stairs and listened. The sound looped round and round the living room. Then, silence. I stepped down far enough to peek. The coffee table was upside down. Cushions everywhere. My flashlight flickered. Then every light in the house snapped on. For 5 seconds, maybe, long enough to see the hallway mirror and a shape standing behind me that wasn't mine. Then everything went black. I bolted upstairs and locked myself in my uncle's room. I'd avoided it until then. Something about the door made me uncomfortable, but I didn't have a choice. When I opened it, cold air hit me like I'd opened a freezer. I could see my breath. The room was bare except for a mattress and notebook pages nailed to every wall. Hundreds of them. Same phrase on each. Don't open the hill. I stayed in there until morning. That day, I found the map tucked behind the mirror. Hank had drawn a crude layout of the land and marked a spot near the tree line with red pen, circled 3 times. Next to it, buried wrong, never stays down. I thought maybe it was septic, or maybe he just lost it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. That afternoon, I hiked out, about a mile off, just a raised mound under a dead pine tree. The soil was loose, fresh. Someone had dug recently. I didn't dig, I just stared at it and left. That night, around 3:12 again, the front door swung open, slammed shut, then open again. 9 times, then footsteps. Inside the house. I stayed in the room, locked in, breathing shallow. I heard wet, heavy breaths right outside the door, like someone with lungs full of river water. Oh. Then came the whispering, low, male, repeating the same thing over and over. I stayed down. You didn't. It didn't stop until sunrise. I left at dawn. I was 26 when I ended up in Barrow Creek, and honestly, I wasn't planning on staying longer than a week. It started with Derek, my cousin. He had just inherited this old farmhouse from his grandfather, a guy he hadn't seen since he was a little kid. I barely remembered the guy myself. Derek didn't talk about him much, just said he was kind of a recluse. Then, one day, boom, he gets a letter from some dusty law office saying the house is his now. Right after that, he started getting these weird voicemails from a local number. Woman's voice, low and slow, saying things like, "You need to claim it properly." That was it. No explanation, just that sentence, over and over, like some kind of automated warning. At the time, I'd just quit this warehouse job that had me working graveyard shifts, hauling boxes for minimum wage, while my supervisor screamed like he was auditioning for a prison guard job. I was burned out, floating, no real direction. So when Derek said he was heading to this mystery house in the middle of nowhere and asked if I wanted to tag along, I figured, why not? Road trip, free place to crash, maybe some weird family mystery to break up the monotony. Barrow Creek was a town so small it barely qualified as a dot on the map. The drive-in felt like we were going backward in time. Paved roads turned to gravel, then just dirt. The trees got thicker the closer we got, to the point where it felt like we were driving through a tunnel made of branches. The GPS lost signal about 10 miles out, and from that point on, it was just Derek guessing based on printed directions and some vague memory. The town sign said population 211, but it might as well have said good luck. We didn't see a single soul on the drive-in, just boarded up homes, broken windows, rusted out cars that looked like they'd been sitting since the 80s. The quiet was the worst part. No dogs barking, no kids playing, not even wind in the trees. Just the sound of our tires crunching the gravel and the occasional creak of the car as we turned. Derek made a couple of jokes about us getting murdered by banjo-playing hillbillies. Real original stuff. But when we finally pulled into the driveway, he shut up real fast. The house looked like it had been trying to collapse for years, but somehow hadn't gotten around to it. 2 stories, wooden siding that had peeled into strips. One corner sinking into the earth like it regretted standing up straight. The porch was warped and sagging, the railings leaning out like they were tired. Half the windows were covered with thick plastic sheets, nailed in place, not taped, nailed, like someone really didn't want anything getting in or out. We had to shoulder the front door open. It made this sound like the house was sighing. Inside smelled like old pennies and syrup that had gone rancid. metallic and sickly sweet. Furniture was all covered in white sheets, except for one old recliner facing a boxy tube TV in the corner. That thing was spitting static full blast. Here's the thing. It wasn't plugged in. Derek stood there staring at it for a second, then said, "They found him right there, in that chair." After 3 days of silence, we didn't do much unpacking, just set our bags down in the front hallway, grabbed a couple of beers from the cooler, and sat out on the porch. I remember how weird the quiet felt. Not peaceful, just wrong. No insects, no birds, nothing. Even the wind seemed to avoid that place. Across the yard, up on the slope of the neighboring property, I saw this scarecrow. But it wasn't in a field or a garden, just standing there, maybe 10 feet from someone's house, arms down, head tilted forward like it was watching their window. I nudged Derek. "Hey, why would someone put that so close to their house?" He looked, squinted, shrugged. "I don't know, maybe it's art." That was the last time he sounded remotely relaxed. Next morning we drove into what passed for town. Needed food, batteries, whatever we could get. The gas station had one pump, and the guy behind the glass didn't look up until we knocked. When he did, his eyes went right to the key in Derek's hand. An old brass thing on a cracked leather fob. Then he looked away and didn't say another word. Across the street, the diner was open, looked normal enough from the outside, but when we stepped in, everything stopped. I mean, everything. Forks hovered mid-bite, conversations cut off like someone hit mute. And they all stared at us. Derek tried to play it cool, gave our last name when the waitress asked. That's when a guy in overalls got up and walked out, left his food steaming on the plate. We sat down anyway. I figured maybe small-town folks were just nosy. But I caught a woman near the counter mouthing something at me. Her lips moved slow, like she wanted me to really understand. I couldn't make it out. And when I asked her to repeat it, she looked away like she hadn't done anything. That night, we heard it. At first, just the crunch of gravel outside. I figured it was a deer or maybe a stray dog. But then it stopped. Not moved away, just stopped. Right there. Derek grabbed the flashlight and we stepped out onto the porch. The light swept across the yard. Empty. Nothing but our breath and the creaking of the boards under our feet. I turned and looked up the hill. The scarecrow was gone. Derek laughed, but it was the kind of laugh people use when they're trying not to admit they're freaking out. "Okay," he said, "somebody's messing with us." Next morning, we found it. Laid out across the roof of Derek's truck like it had been tossed there. One leg stuffed into the exhaust pipe. Head gone. Hay pulled out and spread into a perfect ring on the hood. We didn't talk about it. Just took it down, brushed off the hay, and drove back into town. I tried to get answers. No one would talk. The gas station guy actually turned his back on us mid-sentence. At the diner, the same waitress from before leaned in and whispered, "You should leave before it walks." Wouldn't say more. Later, this older guy, one ear twisted like it had been mangled in a fight, stared at the key in Derek's hand and muttered, "Should have burned that place down when we had the chance." After that, we stopped asking. That night, Derek found the tapes. He'd been digging through the attic looking for anything valuable. Antiques, collectibles, anything he could pawn. Came down with a tin box full of cassette tapes. Each one was labeled with a number and a word. Voice, wall, shadow, again, about 30 total. We played the first one, static, but underneath, if you turned the volume all the way up and held your breath, you could hear whispering. Let it walk, let it walk, let it walk. Another tape had his grandfather's voice. Calm at first, talking about a man he saw near the creek every night. "He stands just behind the trees," he said. "Doesn't move, doesn't blink. Every night he's a little closer." Then the voice broke. He started begging, kept repeating, "We all feed it eventually, or it takes everything." Then a scream. high-pitched and sudden, like someone falling off a roof. Derek said we had to leave. I wanted to take the tapes to someone who could analyze them. Maybe a professor, a paranormal group, I don't know. He agreed, but that night I caught him standing at the window, knife in hand, just staring out. He said he saw someone walk past the house, right outside the beam of his flashlight. But when I looked, the yard was empty. Next day, we saw it, a figure across the road, half hidden in the trees, tall, perfectly still. No face, no detail, just the shape. Derek shouted, "Nothing!" He started walking toward it. I grabbed his arm. "You're not going over there. I just want to know who it is." "You already do." I didn't mean to say it, but once I did, I knew it was true. That night, every light in the house flickered, then went out. We checked the fuse box. No blown breakers. Then we heard a sound upstairs, not footsteps, a scrape, slow, long, something being dragged. We grabbed our flashlights and bolted outside. The scarecrow's head was in the driver's seat of Derek's truck. We ran 2 miles down that winding gravel road straight to town. Made it to the diner. Marcy, the waitress from before, offered to drive us back. But when she pulled into the driveway, she wouldn't turn off the engine. "I used to come here when I was little," she said. "Your grandfather fed it." "Fed what?" Derek asked. "The quiet man," she said. "He comes when things go still, when people forget. The house, this house, is where it starts." She wouldn't come inside. That night, we burned the tapes, all of them. Tossed them into the fire pit out back, and every single one screamed. Not fake screams, real ones. Male, female, some sounded young, some called our names. Plastic bubbled and warped. The fire turned green for a second. At dawn, we left everything, walked away and didn't look back. I was 26 the summer I ended up in Hollow Creek, Kentucky. I didn't exactly plan on it. I'd been floating around eastern Tennessee for a few weeks, mostly sleeping on friends' couches, after walking out of a warehouse job that had become the definition of going nowhere. I didn't have much of a plan beyond not that. One night, I was sitting in a half-broken lawn chair in someone's backyard, drinking warm beer, when a friend of a friend mentioned a place I could stay, cheap, quiet, no questions asked, just a trailer, way up in the hills. Place was called Hollow Creek. The guy who owned the trailer was named Ellis. I called the number that night. He picked up immediately. Didn't even say hello, just $400 a month cash. You handle your own food and trash. Don't mess with the shed. That was it. No name, no lease talk, no small talk. The line went dead right after. I didn't have any better options, so I loaded up my old Civic with my duffel bag, some ramen packets, a blanket, and a half-working space heater. Took off 2 days later. From the last gas station, it was a long 30-minute drive up cracked switchbacks and gravel roads, the kind where you feel your tires slipping just enough to make your stomach clench. Eventually, I saw the sign. "Welcome to Hollow Creek," barely visible, nailed crooked to a rotting pine tree. It looked like it had been there since the 1950s and hadn't been touched since. Just past it was the trailer, off-white, streaked with rust, sitting on uneven cinder blocks. The front step tilted when I stepped on it, because one block was missing. The place looked like it might fold in on itself in a strong wind. No Ellis. No car in the makeshift dirt driveway, just me and a sticky note taped inside the screen door that said, "Key under mat." The inside was what you'd expect. Basic. Twin bed with a sagging mattress. A couch with one armrest torn open, foam spilling out. The fridge worked. The stove smelled like gas when I turned it on, so I stopped trying. There was no microwave, no TV, no radio, nothing hanging on the walls, just plain beige panels and silence. The back window faced the forest, real thick trees, like the kind of woods that don't let sunlight through until noon. I walked around outside trying to get a feel for the place. No neighbors, no mailboxes, no signs of other people living nearby. It felt like I'd stepped into the part of the map they forgot to draw. That first night, I lay in bed and listened to coyotes howling somewhere out in the hills. That didn't bother me. But what came after did. Once they went quiet, there was nothing. No insects, no wind, no movement. Just this weird vacuum-like silence. Like the air had been sucked out of the place. I told myself it was just the way sound moved through the trees. Old forests can muffle everything. I'd heard that before. Tried to believe it. Next day, I drove into what passed for town. Hollow Creek had 6 buildings, 1 diner, a single pump gas station, a post office the size of a closet, a church with a crooked steeple, a boarded-up general store, and a bar with no sign, just a red door. Only the diner was open. I stepped inside, sat at the counter. It was empty except for a woman behind it, maybe in her 60s. She had her hair pulled back tight and was wearing a faded apron. She didn't say hello, just poured a mug of coffee and set it down in front of me. Her name tag said, "Shirley, you're in Ellis's place," she said. Not even a question. I nodded slowly, caught a little off guard. She stared at me like she was figuring something out. Then she said, very clearly, "Don't go walking after dark." I blinked. "Why not?" She didn't answer, just turned and disappeared into the kitchen. That night, I couldn't sleep. Tossed and turned until just after 2 a.m. I remember the exact time, 2:11 a.m. I looked at the red digits glowing on the nightstand clock and just sat up. I didn't hear anything at first, but something made me look out the window. There was movement in the trees. A person, walking slowly between the trunks. No flashlight, no glow from a phone. Just a figure, weaving through the woods like they knew every inch of it. I watched them for what felt like forever. They didn't come closer, didn't stop, just passed through and eventually disappeared behind the thicker brush. I sat there the rest of the night, too wired to lie back down. In the morning, I walked out to the back fence where I'd seen them. Nothing obvious, just forest, same as before. But as I turned to head back toward the trailer, I saw something draped across the fence. A rope. It looked brand new, clean, no fraying, tied in a perfect loop like someone had practiced over and over to get it right. I took a picture and texted it to Ellis. No response. That evening, I went back to the diner. Shirley was already pouring the coffee when I walked in. She didn't look at me. "You see the rope?" she asked, flatly. "Yeah," I said. "What does it mean?" She didn't say anything. Just bent down behind the counter, pulled out a small spiral notebook, scribbled something, and tore the page out. She slid it across to me. "Leave before Friday," she said. The note said, July 14th, rope day. It was Tuesday. I sat there for a long time, coffee going cold. I Googled the town. There was almost nothing. A handful of obituary listings, people all buried in the same place, Hollow Creek Memorial Ground. No photos, no town website, no local events. It was like it existed just enough to prove it did and nothing more. That night, I left the lights off and sat in the kitchen, facing the back window. At 2:13, it happened again. A knock, not on the door, on the wall, just beneath the kitchen window. Soft, like one knuckle tapping gently. Just one, then footsteps. On the leaves outside. Slow, steady, making a wide circle around the trailer. Every few feet, another knock. Always low, always on the wall. Like they were testing for hollow spots. I didn't move. At sunrise, I opened the door. 3 more ropes had appeared overnight. One on the hood of my car, one looped around the antenna, and one tied carefully to the front step like a ribbon. I called Ellis again. This time, he answered. "There are ropes all over the trailer," I said. He didn't speak. "Shirley told me to leave before Friday." More silence. "Tell me what's happening." Finally, he spoke. "They picked someone." "Who's they?" "The town. It's old. Before settlers. It's always done this. Used to pick locals who did wrong. Then people left. Now it's outsiders. Happens every few years. He hung up. I packed everything into my duffel, went to start the car, dead. Wouldn't even click. My phone wouldn't turn on either. I walked into town. Everything was shut. Diner closed, gas station boarded up. Church door was open, a crack. I pushed it wider and stepped inside. No pews, no altar, just an empty room with a pit in the center. Dirt inside looked freshly turned. Around the edges, 12 ropes hung from nails in the walls, each one tied in that same tight loop. No windows, just the pit and the ropes. I backed out, ran all the way back to the trailer. That night, it started early. Around 1:45, not soft knocks, pounding. Dozens of fists slamming the walls from every direction. The trailer actually shook. I dropped to the floor, crawled into the bathroom, and locked the door. Didn't matter. I heard footsteps above me. Inside, not on the roof, on the ceiling. Barefoot steps. Slow. Back and forth. At 2:23, everything stopped. Like someone flipped a switch. I stayed in the bathroom until the sun came up. When I opened the front door, a rope was tied to the handle. My car started on the first try. My phone lit up like normal. I didn't stop driving until I hit a city with streetlights. I'm from a place called Darrow Hollow. You probably haven't heard of it. Most GPS apps still think it's part of a state park or something. It's not. It's just gone, in every way but physically. Not because of progress, not because anyone bulldozed it. People just stopped saying its name. Like, if you don't talk about it, it can't find you. The kind of town where everyone's either a Morrow, a Stokes, or a Delaney. You date someone in high school, and you're probably third cousins. People don't move away. They vanish, and the ones who stay until they don't have a choice anymore. I got out when I was 18. Didn't look back, didn't plan to. My dad stayed behind, still living in that same 2-bedroom house we grew up in. After my mom died, he kind of folded in on himself. Didn't talk much, didn't visit. If I called, he'd pick up and say, "Still kicking," then hang up, like he'd fulfilled his social contract for the year. Then this past spring, I got a call from Sheriff Henson. He said, "Hey, Mason, you might want to come back." He said the mailman found Dad slumped in his chair by the front window, TV still on. No one knew how long it'd been. Might have been a few days, might have been weeks. Henson said it like he was commenting on the weather. He always had that tone, like things didn't hit him the same way they hit other people. I flew in the next day. Lindsay, my sister, met me at the airport. She's 2 years younger than me, lives in St. Louis now, works in a vet clinic. She hadn't been back to Darrow Hollow since her graduation. We didn't even say home. We just called it there. When we pulled up to the house, it looked like it had sunk into the dirt a little. Ivy covered half the siding. One window was completely boarded up. The screen door hung sideways, its bottom half bent like something had kicked it. Inside smelt like a mix of mildew, expired oil, and something sweet underneath, like if you boiled old fruit in a closed room for a week. We didn't talk much that first day, just opened all the windows and tried to breathe through our mouths. We started cleaning on Monday. The place was worse than either of us remembered. Mountains of junk mail, expired food, old coffee cans stuffed with screws and dead pens. The fridge was still running, which we regretted immediately. It was packed with black fuzz and dripping brown liquid. I unplugged it, sealed it shut with duct tape, and we both dragged it to the back porch. Lindsay kept coughing and saying her skin itched. She looked up at one point and said, "I swear this house is watching us." I laughed, but only because the silence felt heavier than her comment. By the third day, we were deep under the kitchen sink, trying to fix a leak. I pulled out a mason jar shoved way in the back. It had that sticky film on it, the kind you don't want on your fingers. The lid was rusted a little, but taped to the inside was a key. There was a label on the jar, faded, yellowing at the corners, but the handwriting was sharp and deliberate. Old Mill. Don't. That stopped us both cold. The mill was 3 miles north. Road to it had been closed off since the ADS. People said it burned down in a storm. Some blamed a lightning strike, others whispered arson. Nobody ever gave the same story, just vague murmurs. Adults would trail off mid-sentence whenever we asked about it, the kind of stories that make you feel stupid for asking. Lindsay remembered Dad driving us out there once. She said he stood at the fence for almost 10 minutes, didn't say a word, didn't even blink, just stared. She was 5. I barely remembered it. That night, something woke me up. It wasn't a sound exactly. It was more like I felt something was moving beneath me, a slow, rhythmic pressure under the floor. Not rats, not pipes, something dragging itself. I got up, walked through the living room, turned on the porch light, looked around, didn't see anything. Next morning, I did. There were bare footprints in the dirt, coming from the edge of the woods behind the house. Long ones, toes curled downward like they were gripping the earth. No heel marks, no signs of shoes, just human prints, only wrong. Like someone stretched the proportions in all the worst ways. They led to the side of the house, then just stopped. I showed Lindsay. She didn't say a word, just put on her jacket and waited by the truck. She didn't want me going alone, but neither of us said it out loud. We followed the prints. They led us past the creek, through brambles that hadn't been cleared in decades, until the trees started to thin. And there it was, the mill, just a hollowed-out skeleton now. Charred bricks, twisted metal, beams like broken ribs jutting from the ground. But the weird part? The door, still intact, closed, and locked with a shiny padlock, brand new, like it had been put on last week. I took the key out of my pocket. Lindsay didn't say anything, just stepped back. The key fit perfectly. Inside, the temperature dropped fast. My breath didn't fog, but I could feel it in my bones. The air smelled like cold rock, wet and sharp. And something else. Something thick and rotted and cooked at the same time. The floor had given way. The crawl space beneath the old mill was now a shallow pit, about 6 feet deep, maybe wider. I leaned over, turned on my flashlight, and looked. Rows of figures, sitting, cross-legged, unmoving, human-shaped but wrong, skin like it had been pulled too tight, gray, veiny, stretched across limbs that bent the wrong way. Their mouths hung open, no sound, just slack jaws pulled wide, like invisible hooks had torn at the corners. And eyes. Big, glassy, unblinking eyes staring straight ahead. Frozen, I didn't speak. I didn't even breathe, just backed out, shut the door, and re-locked it. Lindsay was waiting. She looked at me, eyebrows raised. "Nothing," I said. "It's just a collapsed floor, not safe." That night, I wrapped the key in one of Dad's old shirts and threw it in the creek. We booked a company to handle the rest of Dad's things. Said we wouldn't be there. We packed up fast. I took his truck, Lindsay took her car. We were going to leave before sunrise, but the sounds came back. I was lying on the couch, half awake, when I heard them again. Floorboards creaking. Slowly, then, right outside my door, I felt pressure against it. Not knocking, not trying to open it. Just steady, firm weight. Like something was leaning in to test it. I held the knob with both hands and leaned my back against the wood. Didn't sleep. Morning came. Footprints again, but now there were more of them. All around the house. A full circle, perfect ring. Different sizes. Like it had brought. Lindsay was ready before I was. She didn't even make coffee. Just stuffed her bags in the back seat and started the engine. We left together, me in the truck, her right behind in her sedan. We hadn't even made it halfway to the next town when my phone rang. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Mason, there's something in the back seat." I told her not to stop, just keep driving. Don't turn around, don't look. I glanced in my own mirror. There was something behind me, hunched low, pale, unmoving, like a twisted mannequin made of wet paper. I slammed the brakes and spun around. Empty, but the door didn't open. Something held it. I had to ram my shoulder into it twice before it gave. I tumbled out onto the gravel. When I looked back, the seat was clear, but the smell stayed. Rust and breath and rot. We didn't stop again until we hit a cheap motel 30 miles out. Side-by-side rooms. We didn't talk. Next morning, she was gone. Her car, her room, no note, no luggage. I found it by accident. 3 miles down an old service road, parked at the tree line, engine cold, doors open. Her bag still in the trunk, and footprints, long, bare, curled, leading into the woods. I knew where they were headed. I drove back to the mill. No padlock this time, door wide open. Inside, everything looked the same, except now one of them had dark brown hair, and her eyes were open. I didn't scream, didn't run, just backed out and drove until I couldn't keep my hand steady on the wheel. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've changed towns 4 times. Always rentals, never ground floors. I was 33 when I moved back to a part of Tennessee I never planned to see again. Dunn Hollow. That's where my grandfather lived, if you could call what he did living. He raised goats and stared at trees for most of the day. Didn't say much unless he'd been drinking, and even then it wasn't really talking so much as muttering things that felt like they weren't for anyone else. I'd left Dunn Hollow when I was 18 and swore I wouldn't go back. But you know how life goes. One minute you've got a job, a lease, and plans, and the next you're sleeping in your car wondering if eating peanut butter with a spoon counts as dinner. After getting laid off and burning through my savings, I remembered the house my uncle left behind when he died. No one in the family wanted it. They barely mentioned it. It was out past Maynard Ridge, tucked into a thicket where even the deer looked confused. So I moved in. The place was exactly what you'd expect. Sagging roof, peeling paint, a porch that felt like it might give up if you looked at it wrong. But it was free and it had walls. First few days were quiet. I unpacked, fixed what I could, tried to make it feel like I wasn't squatting in some forgotten shack. But the silence out there wasn't restful. It was the kind of silence that made you think you were missing something, like a song cutting out before the chorus. I kept hearing the floor creak when I wasn't walking, and the walls, they made these popping sounds, sharp and sudden, like something shifting on the other side. I told myself it was just an old house. I said that out loud a few times too, hoping maybe if I said it enough, I'd believe it. The second night, I was sitting on the porch around 11, trying to get a signal on my phone. Only spot that worked was the far corner of the top step. Had to hold the phone sideways like I was using a divining rod and stay completely still. I was just about to hit send on a text when something moved near the tree line. Not far, maybe 30-35 feet. Not like an animal rearing up. This was different. It rose in a way that felt practiced, like it had done it 1,000 times. The shape was wrong, too tall. The limbs looked like they didn't belong to the same body, too long, and the joints bent backward in places. It didn't react. Then, quick as a blink, it dropped to all fours and slipped back into the woods without a sound. I didn't move for a long time. Not frozen from fear exactly, but from confusion. Like my brain needed extra time to process what I saw. Eventually I went inside, locked every door and window, then dragged an old chair under the front doorknob, even though the frame was so warped it didn't really help. Next morning, I walked into Ferris Creek. 2-mile walk, mostly dirt road, barely maintained. I sat down at the diner and ordered coffee just to feel like a person. The woman behind the counter was maybe in her 60s, gray bun, denim apron, hands that looked like they'd seen every kind of work. I asked her if there were any hiking trails or campsites nearby. She looked at me for a long beat, then said, "Not around here. Closest trail's about 12 miles out." I said, "You sure?" Thought I saw someone in the woods, kind of tall, strange looking. She didn't blink. Probably a panther. We've had a few sightings. I said, panther that stands upright. She just refilled my cup and walked away. That night, I stayed up, sat in bed with a flashlight and an old tire iron I'd pulled from the shed earlier that day. I kept telling myself it was probably nothing, probably just some animal I'd never seen before. Around 2, I heard it. Steps, not outside, on the roof. I froze. The steps were slow, even like it was pacing. Then I heard a long scrape, like nails or claws dragging across the shingles. Then a heavy thump, and another, like it jumped off the roof. I crept into the kitchen and peeked out the window. Nothing. I turned off every light in the house and crouched by the back door, iron bar across my lap, ears straining. I could hear something moving outside. Soft pressure on the dirt. Crunch of old leaves. It brushed against the siding just beneath the kitchen window. Then it tapped once. That was worse than any scream. Then it went quiet. I didn't sleep. Stayed in that spot until the sky started turning gray. At sunrise, I checked the shed. The door had deep claw marks across it, 4 long scratches. They started almost at the top and dragged down to the ground. I stepped back and looked at the dirt. There were trails, grooves, not quite footprints, but something had moved through on all 4s, dragging something or itself. I drove to the sheriff's station, told the deputy everything. He listened, didn't write anything down. When I asked if there'd been other reports, he shook his head. I asked if he could take a look at the property. "You stay up by Maynard Ridge?" he asked. I nodded. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Don't go outside after dark." That was it. He stood up and walked into another room. No report, no card, just that warning. That night I set up a trail cam, motion-activated infrared. I aimed it toward the porch, checked the batteries twice, cleared the SD card. Power went out around 11, not a flicker. I went out with a flashlight. The power line was ripped down. Not cut, ripped. The box on the side of the house was bent like someone had grabbed the wire and yanked until it came off the wall. I stayed inside, lit a lantern, and sat on the floor. Around 2, I started hearing voices, not yelling, whispering, fast and sharp, not English, at least not words I recognized. I moved slow, peeking through the windows. Nothing, but the voices kept going. Close now, just past the trees. Then one voice rose above the others, said my name, Lucas. Not a shout, just said it, like someone calling to me across a yard. Then again, Lucas. I didn't move, barely breathed, just backed away from the window and sat with my back to the wall. By morning, I still hadn't moved. I grabbed the camera, pulled the card, watched the footage. 3 clips. First one, me walking into the house. Second, total darkness. Something triggered it, but nothing showed. Third, her face, right up on the lens. Skin pale and stretched too tight like it didn't fit. No hair, no eyebrows. Mouth hanging open, teeth flat and filed down. Eyes huge, black, too far apart. I just stared. Then blank 4 seconds. Then it was gone. I left that day. Packed a bag, drove west to stay with a buddy near Clark County. Didn't tell him much, just said I needed space. I sold the house a month later, never met the buyer, hired someone to sign the papers, didn't ask questions. I was 17 when I started working nights for this old guy named Vernon Tate. He ran a junkyard just outside of West Hollow, a tiny place buried in the hills where you lose cell signal about halfway up the main road and don't get it back until you're heading home. It was the kind of town where everyone knew your business before you did, and people had long memories. If someone didn't show their face for a while, people didn't really ask questions. They just quietly agreed not to bring it up. Vernon was a weird one, even for West Hollow. Lived alone in a shack behind the junkyard office. Barely said 2 words to anyone at the diner. Folks said he used to be rich, back in the 80s or something, but no one knew how. By the time I met him, he was just the old guy who paid cash to keep his yard running and didn't want company. He hired me without looking me in the eye. "Night shifts only," he said, counting out 20s in that stiff, old man way. "You're just here to keep things quiet. Don't go poking where you don't belong." At the time, I figured he meant drunks or maybe the occasional tweaker. There were a lot of old cars out there, vans, trucks, whole school buses, with parts worth something if you knew what to look for. Nothing I hadn't seen before. I took the job because I was trying to get out of West Hollow, save up, maybe move somewhere, with real streets and buildings taller than 2 stories. The place always felt like it had its fingers wrapped around your ankle, like the trees were leaning a little too close. People left sometimes, but they always came back looking worse. Or they didn't come back at all. The trailer where I'd be stationed was rough, real rough, half sunk into the dirt with one window that didn't shut right. Inside was a lumpy old couch that smelled like moldy peanuts, a hot plate, a mini fridge that hummed like it was choking, and a .22 rifle with one clip Vernon said was just in case. That first night, I walked the fence like he told me to, flashlight in one hand and the walkie in the other. There were piles of cars stacked 3 high in some spots, like a giant had dropped them there. The flashlight bounced off windshields and rusted bumpers. I remember passing an old church van with shattered glass all over the seat and a stuffed bear stuck headfirst in the grill. Every time I passed it, I swore it had shifted a little. The crickets would stop whenever I got close. Not fade, just stop. Total silence, then start again once I walked past. That freaked me out more than anything else. Nothing happened that night, but I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch with the rifle in my lap and kept checking the door even though I'd locked it 3 times. The second night, I heard footsteps. Not animal sounds, not the wind. Actual footsteps. Slow, heavy ones, walking over gravel. I stood up fast and shouted through the door. "Hello?" Nothing. The walkie stayed quiet. I scanned the yard with the flashlight. Just twisted metal and shadows. But I know what I heard. I stayed up till dawn, with my hands sweating on the rifle grip. Third night, around midnight, the walkie buzzed. I grabbed it immediately. Just static at first, then a sharp pop. Like someone tapped the mic once, then let it go. That was it. No voice, no signal. I stared at it for a while, then turned it off. When I told Vernon the next morning, he didn't act surprised, just nodded and handed me a second clip. "If you hear anything, don't go outside," he said, dead serious. "You step out that door, you don't got cover. Just wait it out." I asked, "Has anyone ever tried to break in?" He just looked at me for a few seconds. Then he said, "Ain't people you should be worried about." I laughed. He didn't. From then on, I stayed inside after dark, barricaded the door with a chair, slept sitting up with the rifle balanced across my knees. The noises got worse, scraping metal, soft thumps, the sound of something bumping against hoods or dragging across fenders. Always between 2 and 3 in the morning. One night, there was a knock at the trailer door. Just one, sharp and deliberate, not loud, just enough to make sure I heard it. I froze. Waited maybe 60 full seconds. Then I yanked the door open, rifle raised. Nothing, but in the dirt just below the bottom step, bare footprints. Toes too long. One foot had 6 of them. No tracks leading up to them. No path away. Just prints. Like something had appeared, knocked, and vanished. I stared at them until I felt dizzy. Then I closed the door and didn't sleep at all. Told Vernon again. He didn't ask questions, just looked at me and said, "If you see it, don't speak. Don't move. It gets confused when you're still." "What gets confused?" I asked. He didn't answer. Just handed me a ring of keys and said, "If I'm not here one morning, lock the gates and leave. Don't come back." I should have listened. I didn't. Started spending most nights at the trailer window, watching. Sometimes I'd see movement between the rows. Quick shadows slipping low, like something crawling or hunched over. Never saw its face. Sometimes I'd catch a flash of something shiny, maybe eyes, but only if the light caught it just right. One night I dozed off, just for a second. When I opened my eyes, the trailer door was wide open. The rifle was gone. I scrambled up, heart in my throat. Nothing looked touched. But then I saw it. The rifle, leaning casually against the fridge like someone came in and gently set it there. The clip was missing. After that, I kept every bullet in my pocket. I didn't trust the rifle anymore. 3 nights later, something had changed in the junkyard. Down the middle aisle, every hood was popped open, neatly. All the engine compartments were clean, too clean. Not stripped like a thief would do it. No grease, no dirt. Every wire gone, every bolt untouched. And there were drag marks through the gravel, like something had crawled from one car to the next, feeding. Vernon didn't show up the next 2 mornings. I stayed anyway, hoping maybe he'd just gotten sick. Left notes on his shack. Nothing. Then I saw it. Middle of the night, just after 3, I caught movement between 2 stacked vans. I leaned close to the window and saw it. Hunched down, elbows bent backward like insect legs, arms too long. Its head tilted at an angle that didn't make sense. It was watching me. I couldn't see a face, but I felt it looking. Felt it like pressure on my temples. The walkie buzzed again. I almost didn't grab it, but I did. This time it was breathing, long, deep breaths, like someone was standing inches from my ear. I turned it off and sat still until the sun came up. That morning I went to Vernon's shack. Door was open. Inside, the place was bare. No clothes, no dishes, no furniture except a stained mattress. In the sink, there was a pile of charred photographs. I pulled one out. Half burned, edges melted, but I could make out kids. Group photos. School stuff. But their faces were all distorted. Melted. Like whoever burned them couldn't stand to look anymore. I called the sheriff. He came out, looked around, told me it sounded like a bad dream. They filed, Vernon is missing. Junkyard got shut down a few weeks later. I left town that October. Found work laying fiber lines out in Riverside. Did my best to forget. Then last week, I got a letter. No return address. Just a plain envelope, 1 photograph inside. It was me, asleep on the trailer couch. And behind me, in the window's reflection, 2 pale hands pressed against the glass. Long fingers, 5 on each. Spread wide. No face, just the hands. My name's Caleb. I was 16 the year my cousin Darren and I found that old cellar behind St. Avery's Church. We grew up in a place called Marlin Ridge, buried deep in the hills of eastern Kentucky. If you blinked, you'd miss it. Just trailers, old barns, and long stretches of cracked pavement with more potholes than paint. Population was about 400 on a good week, and if someone passed, they didn't bother updating the sign. Wasn't much reason to. Nothing ever really changed. Our version of fun usually meant either driving up to Hatcher's Bluff to see if we could catch a single bar of service, or hanging around the church burn pile on Friday nights, watching them torch dead brush and old furniture. We weren't the only ones either. People brought lawn chairs sometimes. That's how exciting things got. Darren and I were tight. He was a year older than me, always had a smart-ass Comet loaded and ready, and walked around like nothing scared him. He carried this old hunting knife his granddad gave him, always clipped to his belt, like he expected a wild hog to jump out from behind a pine tree. I was quieter, more cautious. If Darren was the one lighting the match, I was the one holding the bucket of water, just in case. Most afternoons we'd wind up behind St. Avery's, roaming through the woods behind the cemetery. We told our folks we were just walking trails or tossing rocks, but mostly we went back there to get high and avoid everyone else. That patch of forest felt forgotten. Paths grew over so fast, it was like the trees wanted to erase them. Gravestones tilted at weird angles. Some had no names, just dates, if that. And the trees were too tall, like unnaturally tall. They blocked out the sun long before it set. One afternoon in early October, leaves crunching, air just starting to get that bite, we were messing around behind a row of broken headstones when Darren caught his foot on something and nearly face-planted. He swore, yanked his foot free, then bent down to see what had tripped him. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. I wandered over and crouched next to him. He was brushing away a mess of dead leaves and broken branches. Underneath was something man-made. Two thick, weather-warped boards set into the ground side by side like a door laid flat. A rusted iron ring stuck out from the middle. The dirt around the edges looked off. Not fresh or anything, but sort of sunken. Like something had been opened and closed over and over again, just not recently. Darren looked up at me with that grin that always meant trouble. "Bet there's moonshine down there. Or a preacher's dirty secrets," I said. "Or a family of snakes. Want to go first?" He didn't hesitate. Grabbed the ring and pulled. The wood groaned like a dying animal. I actually flinched. But the thing opened. Just like that. Beneath it was a staircase. Stone steps, barely visible in the dark. The kind of black that made you feel like it was looking back. We both stared down into it. I remember waiting for a smell. Dirt, mold, dead animals, something. But there wasn't anything. Not even the usual mustiness you'd expect from an old cellar. It was just blank, like air had given up trying to exist in there. Darren wanted to go down right then. Of course he did. I stopped him. Told him we needed a real light, not just a lighter, and our phones. He pushed back, but eventually agreed. Made me promise not to say a word to anyone. I gave him my word. That night, after my parents were asleep, I slipped out my window and cut through yards until I got to his place. He was waiting behind the rusted tractor near the shed. No flashlight, just his dad's old kerosene lantern, the kind with the thick glass sides and a smell that clings to your clothes. We didn't say much, just started walking. The woods were different at night. Every path looked unfamiliar. The sounds were sharper. Twigs snapping, leaves crunching, like footsteps just behind us. I kept checking over my shoulder, even though nothing was there. Not yet. The cellar door was still open when we got there, just sitting there like we'd never left, like it had been waiting. Darren lit the lantern. It hissed for a second before the flame caught. Then we started down. The steps were stone all the way, not just at the top like I'd assumed. Worn in the middle, slick in spots. I kept one hand on the wall the whole way down, just in case. When we hit the bottom, I expected to feel dirt or gravel under my shoes, but the floor was smooth, packed tight like concrete, but not. It felt too deliberate, like someone had shaped it by hand. The room wasn't big, maybe 10 by 10, tops. The walls were shored up with fat wooden beams, old and swollen like they'd sucked up every bit of moisture down there. In the middle of the room was a single table, and on it, a stone box. The box was about waist-high, rectangular, and heavy-looking. The carvings on it weren't decorative, they were obsessive. Spirals, jagged little thorns, symbols that almost looked like bones or claws. Someone had scratched the same marks over and over until the whole surface was covered. There was no pattern, just madness. Darren took a step toward it. I grabbed his sleeve. "Seriously, maybe we don't." He gave me that look, half smug, half teasing. "What, you think it's cursed?" "I think it's weird as hell." He put a hand on the lid. Nothing happened. He grinned. Then he started sliding it open. "Darren, wait." Too late. The lid scraped as it moved. Dry stone on stone. Inside was a coil of something deep red and shiny. For half a second, I thought it was velvet or silk. Then I saw the strands, the texture, hair. Human hair. Thick braids of it, packed in layers, black strands woven with red thread. Some still had bits of scalp attached. Others looked brittle, like they'd been burned or buried. It wasn't a wig collection. It was a storage container for people. "Darren, didn't say a word, didn't even blink. Then, because of course, he reached in and touched one. The lantern flared, a burst of light like someone had tossed gasoline on it. Then it dimmed again, so fast the room felt darker than before. Daring jerked his hand back. The lid slipped and cracked against the edge of the box. It didn't land clean. Sat tilted, like whatever was inside was moving. We didn't talk. We just left, climbed the stairs, walked through the woods, not a single word until we hit the road. Then Darren said, "It was just hair." I didn't answer. That night I left every light on, curtains drawn. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sun. Next day, Darren didn't show up to school. His mom said he had a fever. I biked over that afternoon. He was in bed, curled up under every blanket he owned, sweating through them. Skin pale, lips cracked. His hands shook when he talked. I asked him what was wrong. He said, "I can't get warm." I told him it was just a fever. He shook his head. "No, not that kind of cold. It's inside." The next morning, his mom called my house sobbing. Darren was gone. Just gone, no note, no signs of where he went. His boots still by the door. I went back to the cellar. The door was shut this time. I opened it. The stairs felt even darker than before. I lit the lantern and went down. The stone box was still there, but the lid? Shattered. Hair gone. Something had stepped in the packed earth. Prints. Not human, not animal. Four-pronged, long toes, sharp at the ends, spaced far apart. I backed out. Didn't say a word to anyone. That night I heard tapping at my bedroom window. Tap, tap, tap. Measured. Steady. I couldn't look, just laid there. Then I did. Darren was outside, or what was left of him. Eyes hollow, skin too tight across his face. His lips moved. No sound came out. I cracked the window just an inch, enough to hear. He leaned close. Breath like mildew and stone. He whispered, "It's still hungry." Then he walked back into the trees. I stopped sleeping comfortably. I was 15 that fall when my parents shipped me off to live with my uncle in Birch Hollow, this forgotten Appalachian town where cell signal went to die. It was one of those places where the road just turns into gravel without warning, and the trees crowd close like they're trying to keep secrets. Not much out there except pine, rusted mailboxes, and the occasional deer that looked just as lost as I felt. Ray was a simple guy. No TV, no internet, no explanations. You feed the goats, you stack firewood, and you don't go past the tree line. He told me the first night. That was it. No bedtime. No chores after dark. Just that one rule delivered like it had been branded into his skull. Behind the house was a barn, barely standing. It leaned to one side like it was too tired to finish collapsing. I kept my bike inside, mainly so I wouldn't have to keep lugging it into the house. There was a root cellar underneath, cool, dark, smelled like moldy earth. I used it as a kind of hideaway when it rained. I found the well by accident. I was rolling my bike around the side of the barn when the ground just gave. My leg plunged into a hole and I went down hard, knee grinding into rocks and roots. I pulled myself out, swearing under my breath, expecting to see a sinkhole or maybe a busted animal den. Instead, I found this ring of stone, half buried in vines and moss. No cover, no crank, just a hole maybe 4 feet across, surrounded by rotted leaves and silence. No water, no breeze, just this thick old smell, like wet dirt locked in a box for too long. It made me pull back instinctively, like whatever was down there didn't want to be disturbed. That night, I brought it up over dinner. Ray was eating canned beans straight from the pot, not even bothering with a plate. "I think I found a well behind the barn," I said. He didn't look up, just kept chewing. Should have stayed buried," he muttered eventually. "Or was it?" Then the dreams started. At first, they were nothing new. Falling off cliffs, teeth crumbling, usual weird brain stuff. But a few nights in, they changed. I'd find myself walking through the woods barefoot. The trees felt too tall, like skyscrapers. No wind, no sound, and I couldn't speak. I'd try, but nothing came out. Something would always be behind me. I never saw it, but the trees would shift in slow, unnatural ways, like they were bending to look. And voices, low, murmuring, never loud enough to understand, but I knew. They were talking about me. Night 4, I woke up with dirt under my fingernails. That stopped me cold. I hadn't left the house. I hadn't even left the bed, but my hands were filthy and my feet were covered in dust and tiny bits of leaf litter, like I'd walked through the yard in my sleep. I cleaned up and told myself I'd sleepwalked. Simple explanation. That's what I wanted to believe. Next night, I locked my door, wedged a chair under the knob. Didn't take chances. I stayed up late watching old DVDs Ray kept around, mostly westerns. Still, I woke up with a cut across my palm and mud caked to my ankles. I didn't say anything to Ray. What was I supposed to say? Hey, I think I'm moonwalking out to some cursed pit in my sleep. By night 6, I gave up pretending it was fine. I dragged a chair to the window and just stared out at the woods. It was too quiet. Not peaceful. Just flat. Around 2:30, I heard something. Footsteps. Slow. Dragging. Not Ray. These were lighter, uncertain. They stopped outside my room. Then 5 knocks. Even. Measured. Then the breathing started. Quiet. Steady. Just on the other side of the door. It stayed for hours. I didn't sleep. In the morning, I cracked the door open. No one. Not even footprints on the dusty wood floor. Ray looked at me during breakfast and shook his head like a disappointed teacher. It remembers, he said. What does? He looked at his plate like the beans had answers. That hole. You looked in. That's all it takes. I told him about the knock. The breathing. He nodded slowly. You hear it. It's outside. You talk to it, it's inside. That was the day he nailed boards across my door from the hallway. Don't open it, no matter what it sounds like, he said. I didn't even argue. It came back that night. Same knock. 5 dull thumps. Then silence. Then my name, Mason. It didn't sound threatening. It sounded like me. Not exactly, but close enough that my stomach turned. You let me out. You woke me. Come finish what you started. I didn't answer. Didn't blink. It stood there breathing for hours. Ray handed me a rifle the next morning. If ever gets in, don't let it say a second sentence. I didn't ask for clarification. I was too scared of the answer. That night, everything was still until 3:13. Then I heard creaking. Not from the door, from the floor. You're under the floor. The boards in the corner shifted. A soft snap. Then something pushed up. Fingers. Gray. Bloated. Nails like splinters. They jerked and flexed like they weren't used to being fingers anymore. The floor lifted, just a little, and something looked through. A face, kind of. Human, but off. Stretched, pale, too long. And the mouth wasn't open, but I could hear it anyway. Not words, just intent. It wanted me. It knew me. And it was patient. I raised the rifle and fired. The sound echoed. Then nothing. It vanished like it had been made of dust. By morning, the boards looked untouched. Ray didn't say a word, just handed me a shovel and walked toward the barn. We buried it again, packed the hole with stones, scrap metal, bricks, anything we could find. We didn't speak the whole time. I left 2 weeks later. I made myself believe it was just stress.